The UK is under lockdown again. The entire country is under a new set of restrictions due to the resurgence for the third time now of the coronavirus. And there is a mutated strain that is also pushing some of these lockdowns into position. So let's talk about what's happening in the UK and whether or not we can expect something like that to happen here as well, considering what has happened in the past year. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're talking about how the UK is under a new set of lockdowns due to the third resurgence basically of the coronavirus there right now. And they're actually experiencing a new mutated strain of the virus that is pushing them into that situation. Now, regardless of speculation as to why these lockdowns are happening, why these restrictions are being put into place, and whether or not these situations actually need to occur in the way that they are, we can just talk about what's happening there and understand whether or not it might happen here in the United States due to the precedent that has been set by these actions in the past. And it's still something we need to prepare for, regardless of the situation surrounding the viral cause of the whole calamity. We still need to prepare for these lockdowns to exist here in the country because they can affect us in many, many different ways. Regardless of how it affects your health, it can easily affect your finances, and it can definitely affect your ability to acquire food or equipment or whatever else you might need due to the fact that things are going to be shut down, closed, and everybody's going to be scrambling to get the same supplies once again. So if you're worried about having another resurgence here in this country and this whole mutated strain scenario occurring here in the United States, hit the subscribe button below because we need to keep talking about what's happening over there so we can be more prepared about whatever might be happening over here, okay? So, they're more restrictive than even their Tier 4 restrictions that they've had in place until now. These new restrictions are pretty much completely lockdown situation. Nobody's allowed to do anything, and the entire UK is affected by this starting today and then moving in until at least February 15th. So we're talking about almost a month and a half where the entire country is under strict lockdown. So 45 days or so, okay, we're gonna say country's under lockdown. Well, think about that here in the future in the United States based on what's happening in this country and what's happening in the UK. Okay, moving from there. This is the third time they've done this now. Third time they've done a national lockdown. We knew a resurgence would happen in the winter. We prepared for the second wave of what was happening with the pandemic, but here we are in the third time in the UK. So that should concern you because a lot of times we talked about there being a first time and a second time, but now we're on to the third time, and that's just a lot of times, okay? So, what can you not do in the UK now? Well, you can't leave your home unless it's for essential reasons. And those reasons are related to essential medical care, or if you have a job that can't be done remotely, or for exercise. Because I believe they found throughout this past year that a lot of people were being less healthy due to the lack of exercise, and it was bad for their mental health as well. So now they're saying that exercise is still allowed. And I believe you're allowed to do that with one other person at the max, okay? So that's the restrictions they have in place right now. Schools are closed to students. They will be doing it remotely again. Now, there are some students who will be allowed in school that are either vulnerable children that live in households that are maybe dangerous for them to be in, or they'll be allowed in school if they have key workers as parents. And what that means is if the parents are essential in the sense that they have to go to work, maybe they work for the government or something like that, those children are allowed to go to school because they have nowhere else to be. Whatever. Okay, nurseries are still open. So if you have small children, I guess you can still have them go to a nursery, which we all know is a haven for kids getting sick, but in this situation, they're still open because otherwise the parents can't go to work or do what they got to do. And I think they found that the financial implications of not allowing people to go to work due to the fact that they didn't have childcare was maybe a bigger problem. So that being said, universities are closed, no in-class courses except for a few select ones that are required to have in-person classes. And I assume that has to do with things in like the medical field where you have to learn how to do things a certain way in person. You can't learn remotely. And I'm sure there's things in the sense of like engineering or stuff like that where people have to be in person to make these things work. So keep that in mind. Universities are closed now too. And that's just how it is over there, okay? Restaurants and bars, takeaway food only. They're not gonna do the takeaway alcohol anymore. So expect more closures and more businesses to shut down and more people to lose their jobs and more incomes to go away. Great. Playgrounds are still open because you got to get that exercise, okay? And playgrounds are sterile. Everyone knows that. But amateur sports are a no. If you're an amateur athlete, you can't do it. It's just not worth it. But premier sports are a yes because they're necessary for the mental health of the entire country, and those athletes need to perform and need to get out there for their countrymen to make sure that they are in the right mindset. And of course, that seems strange, but that is what they're doing. So professional sports, good to go. Amateurs, don't even think about it. Okay. Now, what caused all this? Okay. Well, they had a 7-day running average of new coronavirus cases. And yeah, I just keep saying the word now because it doesn't even matter anymore. It's just been too long. But anyway, 7 days straight of 50,000 plus cases of coronavirus per day. Now, of course, all of those things go hand in hand with things like additional testing and who knows what else, but that's just the numbers they're working with. That's what they're going off of. And they're being pushed into this situation due to the mutated strain of the virus that is supposedly more aggressive and more infectious. Now, of course, a lot of pressure comes from different entities for why these things need to happen. And Boris Johnson is the gentleman in charge of making it happen. So he's being pushed to do all these things and he's putting them into place because I'm sure he's getting a lot of pressure from outside entities that he can no longer say no to. So those things are all happening now. How do we look back in March of 2020 and understand where we might be heading as a country ourselves based on what the UK is doing? Well, what we can say is that on March 19th, the United States had its first lockdowns due to the coronavirus, and that was in California, okay? But then March 23rd, the UK had all of their lockdowns start. So there's a 4-day difference. And what we should understand is that we were first technically, but it was just California. And then every other state was basically at the same time as the UK or afterward. So now they're going first for this third time around. And it should kind of give us a red flag or a signal to say, we're probably next. It would be unreasonable at this point to assume we're not going to have any kind of lockdowns once again. And in fact, with the transitioning administration situation that could possibly be occurring here in Washington soon, try to say that all the right ways, that could definitely lead us into way more lockdowns and way more restrictions than what we've even experienced in the past due to the different ideologies involved in those decision-making processes. So that being said, we should be prepared for similar situation. We should be prepared for this mutated strain to get all the hype that you would expect it to, and to use that hype to push us into these new restrictions in a very forceful way. And we have to understand that regardless of personal belief and regardless of what we agree with or disagree with, this affects businesses directly because they are still having to operate under the guise of law and order and under the guise of what the government tells them they can or can't do. Same with universities and schools and anything else that's publicly funded. So that being said, those entities are going to be affected extremely strongly. And the problem with that is that for a lot of us, that means losing work, losing income, losing our ability to have childcare or whatever else it might be. And that's what we need to prepare for. And when these lockdowns come around again, and I'm pretty sure they will because this is the trajectory we're on, especially watching the UK right now, we're going to have more panic buying. We're going to have all the stuff related to everything that we saw back in March of last year, but it's just going to happen again. And that's one of the biggest issues we're having with this whole pandemic scenario is that it just doesn't go away because that would just be too convenient. So prepare for all these things to be coming your way because we're watching them happen in the UK, and we already know that this is how this whole thing rolls. We watch someone else do it, and then we do it. We do it, and then somebody else does it. And that's just how this whole thing works, okay? So if you have anything else to leave in the sense of information or advice or opinions on what's happening right now in the UK, leave them in the comments below because we got to keep talking about everything that's happening because it is pretty frustrating that we're watching this all happen again. And it's just going to keep getting worse if we allow it to. And at the same time, understand that there is a real possibility of a strong mutated strain of this virus causing problems. And it's still something you should prepare for, regardless of whether or not you believe the narrative of everything happening right now. That is still a possibility. And of course, there is news coming out, which we already know, but it just kind of reiterates the thought process that there's more and more evidence that this whole thing came out of a lab and not necessarily from eating a bat. And that evidence keeps piling up. And of course, most of us have already decided that that's probably what happened. But for those of you who weren't sure, look it up. There's more and more stories about it. And there's a good chance that this virus can keep mutating and keep getting more aggressive, especially if it was designed to do so. So keep those things in mind. Don't think about everything that's happened so far and slack on your ability to defend yourself from a biological threat, but at the same time understand that some of these lockdowns, regardless of how you feel about them, are going to affect you one way or another. And be prepared for that to happen here soon. So if anything else at all, let me know, comments below. Otherwise, that's going to be it for Magic Prep.